Did you know that God once visited a man with two strangers and made a promise so incredible it changed everything? One hot afternoon, as Abraham sat near his tent, he looked up and saw three men standing nearby. But these weren't just any men. One of them was the Lord himself. Abraham was shocked, but he quickly ran to meet them, bowing low to the ground in respect. He was nervous but also excited. He didn't want to miss an opportunity to serve such important visitors. "Please don't pass me by," Abraham said. "Let me bring water for you to wash your feet and rest under this tree." The men agreed, and Abraham rushed to his wife Sarah. "Quick, make bread and I'll get us some meat," he ordered. Abraham moved quickly, selecting the best calf, while Sarah baked. They worked hard, preparing food for these mysterious guests. When everything was ready, Abraham served them the food, standing nearby, watching them eat. It was such an honor, but something unusual was about to happen. One of the men asked, "Where is your wife Sarah?" Abraham pointed to the tent, unsure of what was coming next. Then the impossible happened. The man smiled and said, "I will return in a year, and your wife, Sarah, will have a son." Sarah, who was listening from inside the tent, burst out laughing. She was well past the age of having children. How could she have a baby now? She thought it was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. But the Lord knew her heart. He asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and think it was impossible?" Sarah was afraid. "I didn't laugh," she lied, embarrassed. But the Lord knew. "Yes, you did laugh," he said. Abraham was shocked. Could this really be true? Was Sarah, so old, really going to have a child? It seemed impossible. Yet the Lord was clear. "Is anything too hard for me?" he asked. Abraham couldn't deny it. This was a promise that could not be ignored. As the men stood up to leave, they began walking toward a city called Sodom, where something terrible was happening. The cries of people in pain had reached God, and he was going to check it out. But before he left, God turned to Abraham and said, "Should I keep my plans from you? Abraham, you will be the father of a great nation, and all nations will be blessed through you." Abraham's heart raced. What was God planning? The Lord shared that the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah was so bad, he had to do something. But Abraham wasn't just going to stand by. With a deep sense of fear and urgency, Abraham stepped forward and asked, "What if there are good people in the city? Will you destroy it all? Even if there are righteous people there?" He started asking questions, getting more and more desperate. "What if there are 50 good people?" Abraham asked. The Lord agreed. "If there are 50, I will spare the city." But Abraham wasn't sure. "What if there are only 45? He continued. "Then I won't destroy it," the Lord replied. Then Abraham asked again and again, lowering the number each time. "What if there are only 10 righteous people? Will you save the city for their sake? For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it," God promised. The suspense was unbearable. Could there really be 10 good people in Sodom? Abraham was relieved, but still worried. Finally, after this tense conversation, the Lord left, and Abraham stood there, his heart pounding. He had just witnessed something amazing, a deep conversation with God himself. As Abraham returned home, the weight of what had just happened sank in. The fate of an entire city was on his mind, and what would happen next was still uncertain. Abraham didn't know it yet, but Sodom was filled with wickedness, and the city would soon face destruction. Would there be 10 righteous people there? Only time would tell. But for now, Abraham felt a mix of fear, sadness, and hope, knowing that God's promises were more powerful than anything he had ever imagined. This city was so full of evil that God decided it must be destroyed. But this story gets even more shocking. One man's family barely escaped the flames, and what happened next is even harder to believe. It was night when two strangers, angels sent by God, arrived at the city of Sodom. Lot, who lived there, saw them and immediately went to meet them. He bowed down and begged, "Please come stay at my house for the night. It's dangerous to sleep outside." The angels at first said no. They wanted to sleep in the square, but Lot insisted. So they agreed and went to his house. He made them a meal and they ate. But as they were finishing dinner, something horrifying happened. The men of the city, young and old, surrounded Lot's house and shouted, "Where are the men who came to you? Bring them out so we can hurt them." Lot stepped outside, terrified. He begged them, "Please don't do this terrible thing." I have 2 daughters who've never been with a man. Let me bring them out to you instead." But the men just got angrier. "You're a stranger here, and now you think you can tell us what to do?" they yelled. They were about to break the door down when something shocking happened. The angels reached out, pulled Lot back inside, and slammed the door. Then, in a flash, they struck the men with blindness so they couldn't find the door. The tension was unbearable. The city was full of evil, and the angels had come to destroy it. "You need to get out," the angels said to Lot. "God is going to destroy this city because of how wicked it is. Get your family and flee now." Lot went to warn his sons-in-law, but they thought he was joking and didn't take him seriously. As dawn broke, the angels urged Lot to hurry. "Take your wife and daughters and flee for your lives. Don't look back and don't stop. Head to the mountains, or you'll be destroyed with the city." But Lot was scared. "Please don't send us to the mountains," he begged. "Let us go to a small town nearby. It's small, but I'll be safe there." The angels agreed, "Fine, we will let you go to that town, but hurry, because we can't destroy the city until you are safe there." So Lot ran with his family to the town called Zor. But as soon as they arrived, the sky turned dark and burning sulfur rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah. The cities were destroyed. Flames consumed everything: the people, the houses, and even the land itself. Everything was gone, but Lot's wife, unable to resist, looked back at the burning cities. And just like that, she turned into a pillar of salt. Lot's heart broke. He had been warned, but he had lost his wife in the disaster. The next day, Abraham, who had once bargained with God to save the cities, looked out toward the plains. To his horror, he saw thick smoke rising like the smoke from a furnace. The cities were gone. God had kept his promise, and the destruction was complete. Lot and his daughters fled to the mountains, afraid to stay in Zor. They took shelter in a cave. The sadness and horror of what had happened weighed heavily on them. But then something even more shocking occurred. The older daughter looked at her sister and said, "There's no one here to marry us. Our father is old, and if we don't do something, our family line will end. Let's make our father drink wine and sleep with him so we can have children." The younger daughter, in shock, agreed. And that night, the older daughter made their father drink wine, and he didn't know what happened next. She slept with him, and he was unaware when she left. The next day, the older daughter told her younger sister, "Let's do it again tonight." So they made their father drink wine again, and this time, the younger daughter slept with him. Again, Lot was unaware of what happened. In this strange and terrible way, both daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son, and she named him Moab, the father of the Moabites. The younger daughter had a son named Ben-Ammi, the father of the Ammonites. A king once almost made a huge mistake that would have destroyed his entire kingdom because of a lie from a man he trusted. It all started when Abraham and his wife, Sarah, traveled to the land of Gerar, a place ruled by a king named Abimelech. When they arrived, Abraham was scared. He thought, "The people here won't fear God. They'll see my beautiful wife and kill me to take her." So, Abraham did something unexpected. He told everyone that Sarah was his sister, not his wife. King Abimelech, hearing about the woman, sent for Sarah and brought her into his palace. But what he didn't know was that Sarah was already married to Abraham. That night, while Abimelech was sleeping, God spoke to him in a dream. "You are as good as dead," God said, "because you've taken another man's wife." Abimelech was shocked. He hadn't even touched Sarah. He asked, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? I didn't know she was married." She said she was his sister, and he said she was his sister. "I've done nothing wrong." God replied, "I know you did this in good faith, which is why I kept you from sinning. But now, you must return Sarah to her husband, for he is a prophet. If you don't, you and everyone in your kingdom will die." The next morning, Abimelech was terrified. He immediately called his officials and told them everything that had happened. They were all scared too. What had Abraham done? How could he put them all in danger like this? King Abimelech called Abraham into his palace and asked angrily, "What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you brought such guilt upon me and my kingdom? You've done something that should never happen." Abraham, feeling embarrassed, responded, "I thought no one here would fear God, and I was afraid you'd kill me to take my wife." And yes, she is my sister too. She's the daughter of my father, but not of my mother. We've always said this to protect me. I thought it was safer this way." Abimelech stared at him, then took a deep breath. He gave Abraham sheep, cattle, slaves, and land. "Live anywhere you want in my kingdom," the king said, trying to make things right. To Sarah, Abimelech said, "I'm giving your brother 1,000 shekels of silver to clear the wrong done to you. This will prove you are completely vindicated." But the story didn't end there. Abraham, moved by God's mercy, prayed for Abimelech and his household. The king's family had been unable to have children, but after Abraham prayed, God healed them. The women in Abimelech's household were able to have children again. Abimelech had made a huge mistake, but in the end, God's mercy was shown. Abraham learned a lesson too. Sometimes telling the truth is the only way to protect yourself and others. And King Abimelech learned that even when mistakes are made, there's still hope for redemption. What if I told you that a 100-year-old man and his wife, who was 90, had a baby? You'd probably think I was joking, but it really happened. This is the story of how a miracle came true. Abraham and Sarah had been waiting a very long time for a child. For years, they had dreamed of having a son, but nothing happened. Sarah was too old to have kids, and Abraham thought it was impossible. But God had promised Abraham that he would have a son, and when the time was right, the miracle happened. Sarah got pregnant, and at the exact moment God promised, she gave birth to a baby boy. They named him Isaac. Sarah was overjoyed. She laughed with happiness and said, "God has made me laugh, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." She couldn't believe it. She, a 90-year-old woman, had just given birth, but not everyone was happy. Sarah's joy turned to anger when she saw the older son of Hagar, Abraham's servant, mocking little Isaac. Sarah was upset and said to Abraham, "Send Hagar and her son away. They don't belong here. My son Isaac will inherit everything, not her son." Abraham was heartbroken. He loved his son, but he also loved Isaac. He didn't want to make Hagar and her son leave. But God told Abraham, "Listen to Sarah. It's through Isaac that your family will grow. But I will also make a great nation from Hagar's son." The next day, Abraham gave Hagar and her son some water and bread and sent them into the desert. Hagar and her son, Ishmael, wandered in the wilderness, alone and scared. Soon, the water ran out, and Hagar placed Ishmael under a bush. She sat down, unable to bear watching him suffer. She cried and thought, "I can't let him die like this." But then something amazing happened. God heard Ishmael's cries, and an angel appeared to Hagar. "Don't be afraid," the angel said. "God has heard your son. Lift him up, and I will make him into a great nation too." Hagar opened her eyes and saw a well of water. She filled the water skin and gave Ishmael a drink. God was with them as they moved forward. Ishmael grew up strong, and God stayed with him. He became an expert archer, living in the desert. Hagar found a wife for him from Egypt, and his family grew. Meanwhile, Abraham made peace with Abimelech, the king of the area. The king saw that God was with Abraham in everything he did. He made Abraham promise to be kind to him and his people, and Abraham agreed. But Abraham was also upset because Abimelech's servants had taken one of his wells. After they made peace, Abraham gave Abimelech 7 lambs as a sign that the well belonged to him. Abraham and Abimelech made a treaty, and the place was named Beersheba, which means well of the oath. Abraham stayed in that land for a long time, planting a tree and calling on God's name. The birth of Isaac was a miracle, and it changed everything. Abraham and Sarah's story reminds us that with God, anything is possible, even the impossible. Don't miss our next video on Abraham's shocking test. Will he sacrifice his son?